Welcome to Odyssey's Influencer Insights, your go-to place for anything influencers. Let's jump right in. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Odyssey's Influencer Insights. Today, I'm excited to introduce our guest, Jackson Brunner. Jackson is a multi-talented content creator, photographer, and podcast producer who's worked on major shows like Mood and Unhinged. He's built a dedicated following while balancing his creative passions with his full-time creative role as a producer. In today's episode, we'll dive into Jackson's journey, his strategies for building a robust following, and tips for thriving in the ever-evolving world of media. Jackson, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about this. When you reached out and said you want to come on the podcast, I jumped at the chance because I know we've had some interactions before, but let's get into it.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm excited. Well, I want to start and bring it back a little. You're from Australia originally, but you moved to LA. I want to hear a little bit about your upbringing, what drove you to LA, and just kind of hear about that.
Yeah, for sure. So probably one of the strangest stories that I ended up in LA. I didn't think it was going to happen with sort of like COVID and stuff like that. But going back to when I was just a little kid, it's always been something that I have wanted to sort of do and make the leap. And, you know, with media, it kind of just makes sense. But I don't know if you know this about sort of like immigration and what it's like to get to the States and stuff like that.
No, not
But
really.
it's not an easy feat. They don't kind of make it too easy for you. But yeah, so sort of like, I guess you could consider me somewhat of a country boy from Australia. So, you know, you don't really hear too many people doing what I've done either. And then always sort of like, yeah, wanted to make the leap, I guess, sort of just jumping into how I did get here. When the pandemic happened, everything sort of shut down. So me and my partner were kind of like, oh no, what are we going to do? Probably going to just stay in Australia forever. So we started sort of a side hustle business, and that's sort of like primarily what my partner focuses on as well as their job here. But thought that we'd just go into this thing called the diversity visa lottery. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay, so like it's basically where I think it's like 25 million people apply for this each year. It's just kind of like the lottery for a green card. So you just like chuck your name in, all your details. They do like police checks and stuff like that. You have to go and do all of that. And then, yeah, driving home one day, just thought I'd check my emails while I stopped to get gas. And it said like that I'd been selected to move on to sort of the next round, which is basically you've been picked for vetting and then you've got to go do all the interviews and stuff like that, but ended up winning a green card. And that was kind of crazy because of the pandemic being shut down. The only place in Australia that does all of these green cards and interviews and stuff like that wasn't doing them. Had a fiscal year, sort of went into some sort of legal to try and get it all done and class actions and stuff like that. Ended up getting posted to Fiji where I like me and my partner ran to. We had like 2 days to do medicals and stuff like that. But yeah, got the tick of approval, did all the interviews and stuff like that, and then thought, amazing, what's this going to do for our life? You know, I was 29 at the time, and we just quit our jobs and moved to the States as permanent residents with a green card. And honestly, like that changed our lives. Like it's been the best thing that's ever happened, but probably not the most typical way. And people say all the time, they're like, oh, do you need me to marry you for a green card? And I'm like, nope, already married, got it sorted, we're all good. But yeah, that's how I got here. And I have been here for 2 years now, and I kind of like still pinch myself that my life is real because it just doesn't feel real. It just feels all too cruisy and all too lucky, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, congratulations. Glad that things have worked out and you got your green card and living in the US now. I'm actually, maybe if I was from there, I know a little bit more about, but I'm actually from Vancouver, Canada, so I'm less
Oh,
familiar
okay.
with, yeah, less familiar with how the states and the immigration things work, but no, that's great. And so I'm kind of curious, was LA always where you wanted to go? I know obviously they got more opportunities in kind of that creative sector than some other places. So did you always know you want to go to LA, or were there some other options that you were kind of teetering towards?
Honestly, I wanted to go to New York. This is very embarrassing, but this tattoo here that I got when I was like just 18, terrible idea, don't get tattoos that you're not 100% on, sit on it for 6 months. But I honestly wanted to go to New York, as it says. And, you know, I always thought I'd be like a New York City boy. You know, I love the city. I like, you know, just being in that kind of busy chaos and sort of as a photographer as well, like what the city offers I was always like drawn to. But I ended up coming on holidays here. I think like the first time I was here was 2016, and everyone warned me against coming to LA. They're like, it's horrible. So many homeless people. It's dangerous. It's so spread out. It's hot. There's earthquakes. You're not going to like it. Spend like 2 days here. So flew in. We spent all our time in New York, and then we came back to Los Angeles just to do like a couple of days here. And honestly, those couple of days I fell in love. It was the best sort of like 3-4 days of my life. And then next holiday, we spent more time in LA. And yeah, just like really just fell in love with the energy of this city. I mean, the weather's amazing. I don't think I could have handled the New York City, like winters. No one sort of tells you about how horrible that is, where you can just like stay inside. And I don't know if you've seen like the TikToks of when all of that defrost and the big block ice falls from the tops of the buildings and stuff like that.
Right.
Not for me. As someone who considers myself pretty lucky, I feel like also too I'd be unlucky to go out that way. So, you know, New York's a fun 6-hour flight away, but LA has just become home. Like I have such an incredible circle of friends here. The weather's amazing, as I said. Earthquakes not so much, but I also find that people in LA are very much more on my level of sort of like what I want to do creatively, and everyone's sort of like background and what they are here to achieve has been like super nice, and that's helped me build like a really solid circle. I mean, living away from my family, it's helped me build my family here. So that's nice. So yeah, that's kind of like how I fell in love with LA. It's so beautiful, like, and it offers you such a diverse sort of range of things to do. I mean, as you know, from sort of like my Instagram and stuff like that, as much as I love the city, I also love to be on the top of a mountain every Saturday with a beer in my hand and sort of like rooftop tanning and stuff. I have a 4Runner. So, you know, they say here in LA, you can do the beach in the morning, and then by afternoon, you can be in the mountains where it's snowing, and then you can be in the desert by the evening. So like to be able to tick that box, it's like a perfect trifecta. I don't know. I think it's the best place to be. And I don't think I'll ever leave. Like I went back to Australia recently, and yeah, just didn't feel like home anymore. I was excited to get back to LA because I really feel like I've put some solid roots down here now.
Wow. Well, that's great. Yeah, it seems like an amazing place. I've been, I think, a couple times years ago though, but I got to go back for sure because I'm from Vancouver, so it's just down the coast from me, not even too far. Um,
Yeah.
but you're talking about kind of that creative sector, right? Like what you're doing with photography, content creation, podcast,
Mhm.
everything with that. Were you already starting your journey in Australia? Like when exactly did you know that content creation was kind of a passion of yours and photography?
Sorry. Honestly, since I was a kid, I think, you know, a bit of my background is I started in radio
Hmm.
when I was sort of like younger, and that was always a passion of mine. And something that wanted, you know, something that I'll probably get a little bit emotional about, and you'll understand why in a second. But when I was a kid, we had some family stuff happen. It was like very tragic loss, and it affected my mum, who I like lost recently. So like my mum passed away a couple of weeks ago. So this is sort of like hitting real hard in the core. But when I was a kid, my mum used to take me to school every day. And after, you know, her sister passed away, it was really sort of like really a heavy couple of years in our family. And I think that one of the only times that I would see like mum smile and like mum be truly happy, not truly happy because she was happy, but you know, when you're dealing with all of that sort of stuff, like to get true joy, it's hard to find in times of grief, and grief is so hard. So I would drive to school with mum, and she would laugh and she would smile over stories on the radio. And it was just like so genuine, and she wasn't sort of like pushing through just to smile for us kids so that like we didn't know that she was sort of like going through grief and going through a lot of things. So that sort of like really made me want to be on radio, because like all I wanted to do was make my mum happy, make my mum proud, you know, and I saw what that sort of like medium could do. And also too, when I was growing up, like she always, I'll credit my mum especially, but my mum and my dad sort of, you know, always enabled and like facilitated me being creative. So, you know, they got me radio DJs and things that allowed me to broadcast within like a certain kilometer radius, and took me to community radio and stuff like that. But also too, with the visual aspect of my creativity, which is like photo and video, they were always buying me cameras, and I was always that kid that was filming Christmas and stuff like that. So, I think that definitely that aspect of, seeing how happy these sort of forms of creativity made my mum, made me like really fall in love with it. And then obviously having sort of a natural sort of tact for, being able to take a photo and stuff like that. But really, when you think about it, and it all just comes down to it, is just how impactful that is on the human sort of psyche and the human brain and sort of human emotion as well. And also, too, for me, like, I feel like I'm such an emotional guy. With me, like, one minute I'll be laughing and we'll be getting coffee, and the next minute I'll be crying over a dog that I saw on the street. And I'm very like happy to be that guy, because I think that, like, especially as men, you don't talk about your emotions as much, but being able to have a creative outlet that I can express my emotions, which might sound weird to a lot of people, but a lot of people go, oh, I go to a therapist to talk about things. Whereas like me, I will sort of invest, and this is where photography comes into it. I'll invest a lot of my emotion into that, and sort of like, you'll be able to scroll through my Instagram and sort of get a vibe for where I'm at, sort of like physically, emotionally, all that sort of stuff by the mood of my photos. Like, honestly, everything I take is sort of like a blueprint to sort of like how I'm feeling that month or that day or whatever. So if it's a little bit darker, I'm probably like a little bit more in the seasonal sad kind of thing. And then like the bright, and I don't know if this is sort of like resonating with you or making sense, but sort of that sort of, yeah, where it stands and sort of how it is.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing all that. That was very powerful. And so, when would you say it was in your creative journey when you realized that you could kind of make a career out of this? Because you're saying, you're surrounded with your mother, you're kind of doing some radio stuff, and she's buying you cameras, you're doing some kind of shoots around the house. When was that when you kind of realized that you can take this into the next step? It doesn't just have to be a hobby, but it can actually be your entire life and career.
Honestly, I don't think I've even realized that yet to this day. I think I just keep waking up and being like, oh, this is fun and it's getting me by. But I will say that when I started in radio in Australia, like, didn't pay any money. So like, I had to take any sort of creative sort of avenues that I could to pay bills and be able to live out of home and enjoy my life. So I was doing my first radio gig when I was probably about 17. It was at New FM, and community radio. So this was like a Port Stephens FM kind of thing. And then once I moved into sort of commercial, I thought I'd made it, even though I was only on radio like once a week. I was doing Saturday morning, which was, probably better because no one's awake and they couldn't hear my development then. And I used to think I was shit back then, but, everyone learns and everyone develops. But I was sort of building up a profile somewhat with the work that I was doing within the community that I lived in Australia. And then opportunities came across, like when I was sort of growing my Instagram, and people were like, oh my God, we love your work. And, I remember there was a place in Australia called the Brewery, Queen's Wharf Brewery in Newcastle. And they reached out to me because one of their photographers was sick, and they had Corona Extra, who is that beer company, coming through, and they had sort of like one of their big tours with a band called the Rubens. I don't know if they're anything over there in Canada, but if you like sort of like alternate rock, kind of pop rock, maybe you'll vibe them. But they were like, hey, we'll feed you and we'll give you like beverages and some money, like name your price. And you just have to come take photos of the crowd, take photos of the band. And I was kind of like, oh, I'll do it for free. They were like, no. You'll tell us how much. So I just sort of like gave them a ballpark figure of like, I'm going to be a smart ass here, try and get some money out of it. And they didn't blink an eye. They were like, yeah, for sure. Come along. They fed me. They paid me like really well. And I was like, wow, this was so much fun. I basically got to hang out with my friends all night because that's sort of like the local haunts where my friends went. I got to meet people who at the time were like super famous, and I was playing them on the radio in Australia, and I was like, damn, this is cool. And then, these companies were like the music companies and the bands themselves, and then Corona Extra were reaching out and they were using my photography content and stuff like that. And it kind of just like solidified to me that I actually had a talent that people valued, because I feel like in creative industries, you're always just like, oh yeah, I'll do it for free because I need the experience. Do you know what I mean? I feel like some people reach out to me sometimes still, and they're like, hey, photograph my wedding and we'll feed you and stuff like that. It'll be great for your profile. So it kind of instilled in me that I had some talent, and that also too, that talent wasn't just freebies. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like something that I could bank off.
Yeah.
And if I played my cards right, or like build up my business or build up my brand, that I could implement that into an actual income stream. And I'd never considered that like before. Like obviously radio, yes, but not sort of like the creative outlet of photography and video and stuff like that. So that was kind of like the first time that I'd ever had the carrot dangled in front of me financially to be like, oh, this could be like an actual life for me.
Well, yeah, that's amazing. Congrats on the success there. And so currently to date, like, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing on that photography side? That what you're describing there kind of sounds like working for other companies, right? Doing
Yeah.
content for them. So do you currently do both that as well as I see you also have a robust following on your Instagram? So what's been that like balancing both, and how are you able to grow both that business where you're creating content for other people as well as your personal brand and creating a large following on Instagram?
Yeah. I mean, I probably grew pretty quickly when I moved to the US, and I don't have like a
Hmm.
massive following on Instagram, but like it has become much more since I moved to the States. I think like one of my biggest downfalls is that I just post for me. So like I'm just like out there and I'm like, oh, look at this view, like look where I'm camping tonight, or like look at my car, it's at the beach. Do you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
just post honestly to keep that time capsule of sort of like how I feel. And then people kind of resonate with it. I know that like you go on my Instagram and stuff like that, and I'm not really like giving you many takeaways. Like I'm not teaching photography or anything like
Mhm.
that. I think people just sort of follow me because I don't know, the vibes. They like the
Mhm.
sunsets
It's
or
great
whatever.
vibes, yeah.
And then I'll get on there and do like a cheeky few stories and stuff like that. But in terms of what I'm doing, like with my Instagram now, since I moved to the US, I've just kind of been trying to grow my career within sort of like podcasting and stuff like that. So I would say that Instagram and photography has become a lot more personal to me. It's kind of been the balancing act of like, oh, I'm stressed at work, so I'm going to go out and take photos, and I'm going to sort of like regulate my nervous system or something like that, because that's literally what I utilize it for now. So I'm not doing like a whole heap of photography work. I would say that like
Mhm.
it's a lot less commercial now. And then where I've landed here in the US, which I actually really like because it's helped me build uh, such an incredible sort of like network of peers. And you know, as you know from you know what you do, you would see how incredible the people, like the photographers that I've met here in LA. I'm just like, damn,
Mhm.
like I'm so lucky to be around them. Yeah, so where I'm at now, it's kind of just like I'll do little bits and pieces of photography work for people who reach out, but honestly, it's just sort of become an opportunity to share sort of like my life and my outlook and sort of what my world looks like through the lens whilst I am working in sort of podcasting and stuff like that with the people that I follow. And I would love to sort of like, I'm slowly getting back into building it up. I think that I've invested so much into podcasting in a sense of like, it's my full-time job. And obviously being brand new to a country, you've sort of just got to put pedal to the metal to prove yourself, even though you have that massive track record. It's kind of like you're still the new guy. But one of the beautiful things about what I do and sort of the industry that we find ourselves in as creatives is that everything kind of goes hand in hand. So like, I feel like within photography, the people that I've met have greatly benefited me in radio and podcasting. And the people that I've met, I've been able to sort of like collaborate with far more outside of the bounds of photography, and the same with sort of like podcasting and stuff like that. One of the biggest draw cards that I've had in my career, and I think something that people find very interesting, other than the fact that I'm an Australian that won a green card, is the fact that they look at my Instagram and it's kind of just like this big narrative of my life. And, you know, it really has just gone hand in hand and benefited me so much. And I'm finally getting to the point where I'm kind of working out like what it looks like. Still not 100% sure how that sort of like ties into be like a whole package of who I am as a professional, but it's coming and I can feel it. And I know that it's sort of like something to, you know, finesse, but it will come together if that sort of makes sense. I've always had like this blind faith, like delusional. People say to me all the time, they're like, okay, so what's your advice? I'm like, just be as delusional as you can, because,
Hmm.
you know, what do they say? I don't even know what they say anymore. It's like the sayings escaped me, but yeah, like being sort of like confident in your delusion is practical to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And now it kind of relates to the next question. I mean, I got a couple of questions from what you're saying, but the next one is someone that's kind of starting out, because it seems like since you got to the US, you've grown a lot on Instagram. If let's say there's someone that's kind of starting out and they're struggling to see results, but growing their personal brand on Instagram is a key goal.
Mm-hmm.
From your growth experience, are there a couple of key recommendations that you'd say to those people?
I would say, you know, inject yourself in your community and your surrounds. There are so many like talented people. You know, and I live in LA, like I live in a massive city. So like, I guess saying that is easy. Maybe if you're like a guy or a girl, that's sort of like in a rural town or something like that, it's not as easy. But I think like one thing I've always been like super, super, super happy to throw myself into is like traveling to do photography meets, or, you know, like if I do have, and obviously be safe about this, I don't want to promote like bad internet safety etiquette, but, you know, if you have like Instagram, and honestly, like most of my friends in LA have been from Instagram, and, you know, people that I met here from photography, if you have people that you've built like a solid sort of network with online, go meet them, go photograph with them, and go do shoots with them, and do photography meetups. And if people aren't hosting photography meetups, go and create your own. I think like networking honestly is like the biggest thing for me, collaborating with people to just sort of like, you know, get your name out there and get people seeing you and meeting more people. And then, you know, word of mouth, like people in my circles are always so complimentary, and we always sort of go, you need to be following this person, or like, you need to be reaching out to this person because your style would just work so well with them. So that's been a huge key to sort of like me growing, not only personally, but like online, or not only online, sorry, but personally as well. I mean, like these people that I've met and been exposed to within the sort of like online community that I've been a part of and helped, like I've been trying to build and stuff like that, really has shaped me as a person so much more than like I feel like I would have gotten out of life if I was just sort of meeting people at bars and stuff like that. And that is the beauty, I think, of the internet and Instagram and stuff like that, is that it just opens up your world so much to be able to interact more freely with people who are sort of like on the same level as you. And that's not even just in creative industries. I mean, you could just be like someone that loves dogs or cats or hedgehogs, for God's sake. I mean, and then there's a community online for it that will welcome you and sort of like, you know, and that in itself helps build my confidence. But I will say this, having like an identity has been the most important thing for me. I think like in my early 20s, I was kind of like not lost. Like I've always known who I was, but my work has never benefited so much from me being confident in the person that I am and the stories that I want to tell. And just like also knowing that with what I do or with what I post, there is value there. And I think as a creative, like you can often get caught in this sort of like wheel of that person edits better than me, or that person has a better drone than me that can get higher, or like that person is doing more podcasts than me or whatever. And, you know, especially radio was a place that taught me this, was kind of like, if you aren't sort of like very comfortable with who you are, the audience will know that you're faking it. And I think that in creative fields, that, well, to me, that's my biggest sort of like advice and takeaway. And this is what I tell the talent with the podcast that I produce as well. It's like when I'm launching shows, don't fake it, because you have an audience, like you're building an audience naturally. And when you start to fake it, people are going to know that you're bullshitting to them. You know what I mean? And then if you're not like confident, you don't know who you are, the narratives that you tell just aren't going to resonate with people. And I mean, the narratives that you tell as a confident person are not going to sort of resonate with everybody. But I think that when you're honestly out there and you're like talking your truth, and you're sort of like, and it sounds very cliche, like I feel like we should be sitting on the beach right now listening to a sunset talking about manifesting and this and that and whatever. But it is so like true. It's like no one cares if you're going to get online and just bullshit them. And I think that like we have access to so much now, and so many people, like, so you do know when people aren't telling the truth, or they're kind of like manufacturing this reality. So yeah, finding my identity, long way around saying that, was something that helped me so much. And I did notice that people would start following me more or start reaching out to me more with like posts that I make or things that I put on my story. You know, and again, tracking back to that, I'm a very emotional guy. Like I try to tie like everything I do with photography into sort of like how I regulate my emotions, because I don't go to therapy because I'm one of those people that knows better, and it's probably going to bite me in the ass one day, especially with some stuff that's happened in my life recently. But honestly, the creative industries are my outlet for therapy and how I see it. And when I started to be honest with it, it just helped me grow so much as a person. Personally, I keep tracking back to that. It helped me grow personally as a person, but also too, like it helped my platform grow a lot more because people resonated so deeply with me just being like very authentic, and they could sense that.
That's amazing advice. I feel like throughout that I kept having questions and then you kept answering them. It was so good. So
I feel like I'm talking way too much. I'm just
no,
a typical
no,
Australian that loves to
no,
yap, so just tell me to shut up. But yeah.
no, no, it's perfect. Um, no, making my job easier, so no complaints there. Uh, so I think now I kind of want to transition into what you're doing now with the podcast. You touched on that a
Hmm.
little bit, and so you started
Yeah.
with radio, and now you've gone into podcasts. I see that's where you're working full time as a podcast producer, right?
Hmm.
Can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about what that's like?
Yeah, it's been an interesting shift. I mean, for me, and excuse me, I'm just going to cough very quickly.
No problem.
Sorry. It's been an interesting shift. I think a lot of people would assume like radio is very similar to podcasting, completely
Hmm.
different ball game. But for me, the way that I saw the industry going was that, you know, radio, you know, I feel like radio is always going to be around, but it's a little bit more old school. And I kind of wanted to be in something more secure and test myself a little bit more. I do miss being on the microphone a lot because in radio I was sort of like producing, but I was also on air full time. So I was on air like 6 days a week, and I missed that aspect of it. So I definitely feel like I need to start a podcast. So you've given me some sort of like pep in my step with inviting me on.
Love
So,
to hear
and I'm
that.
excited to like listen to all of this as well. It's so exciting. Um, but there's just like an energy, and as you know about this, like organizing interviews and sort of like interviewing people. It's a lot of fun. So moving into podcasting was kind of like a no-brainer for me. Next step kind of vibes, and you know, doing breakfast radio got burnt out. So when I moved to the US, I said to myself, I just want to take a year off. And I said before we should be sitting on a beach because this is about to go into like the manifestation circle of it. But the way that sort of like my life has turned out, and this might just be like mind over matter, or this just, you know, someone who has very clear goals. I don't know, but I just feel like there's something so much more to it. Like, for instance, tracking back to my story about how I won my green card, I wrote from a TikTok, someone was like, just write in a diary and things will happen. And I was like, yeah, right, that's bullshit. Like, okay. But I'm going to try it because I'm always a guy that'll try things once. So I just got like this random diary, and I could show you. It's just over here. But I wrote, so grateful that I got to move to LA, and then just threw it in my backpack. And then one day when I got that email, I'm like, I honestly kid you not, I read that diary, and on the exact day that I wrote in that diary was the exact day that I got the email saying that I had won the opportunity, or like I'd been selected to be processed for more processing for a green card. I was like,
Wow.
that's weird. That's not how it works out. So I moved to America, and I say to myself, and I just really make clear intentions, because that's something that I've done to sort of help become more of a, not stable, but like, what's the word? It's, I don't want to say stable because like I feel like I'm very stable, but just sort of like more one with myself. I think that like in radio, I ran on high anxiety and was just always sort of like pushing it. So I wanted to do like a complete sort of reset on sort of like my life and how I felt, and sort of like, you know, how I was living, moving to the US, and kind of just becoming more carefree. I didn't want to be the guy that was losing my hair because I was like not sleeping, and I didn't, you know, ever stop stressing about things that were going to air. And I didn't want to be the guy that was like just a yes man all the time, because I'd be like, yep, I'll work weekends because I don't have kids. I'll work Christmas, New Year's because I don't have kids. And then I neglected my friendships, and I neglected my family, and I neglected sort of my relationship. So I really did the work on myself, and I said to myself, I want to take a year off. So when I moved to America, fortunately, like with the business that we have and stuff like that, I was able to sort of somewhat do that. But I got bored and I got itchy, and I started applying for jobs. The job market in LA is horrible. So, you know, wasn't sort of getting anywhere. I was kind of like, nope, nope, nope. And I had like a dream company. So my dream company was Dear Media. It's the company that I work for now. And I had applied for a job with them. And then I kid you not, pretty much a year to the week that I moved to America, where I was just saying like, I need to take a year off. So a year to the week, I get an email. They've obviously held my resume, and I had a friend that I met through Instagram, a very good friend of mine. Her name's Nikki. She's one of the most incredible graphic designers that works for Dear Media. She sort of like said, hey, he's looking, we would have coffee. She didn't know me at all, but again, this is where your community comes in handy so much. We just met on Instagram, and we would go to coffee, and we just really clicked, and they were looking for a podcast producer, and Nikki was in the building, and she sort of just recommended me. So a year to the day that I moved to America, pretty much, they emailed me and they were like, hey, are you still interested? We know that you've applied for a job probably 6-7 months ago, and we'd like to interview you. And I was like, damn, that's weird. The universe giving me a full year off and then like putting me right back into it. And I actually, it's funny because going through the interview process and stuff like that, just couldn't believe that I was interviewing with the dream company. Like, I mean, Dear Media really is the future of podcasting, just the way they do it and how they do it. And, you know, it's just where I wanted to be. And it was funny because when I finally got the job, we sort of met with the owner of the company via Zoom, and his name's Michael Bostic, and he is just probably one of the coolest people in the industry, and what they've done with Dear Media is just like incredible. Like, it's very, very admirable, and it's just such a great business to be a part of. And it was such a great business to sort of like watch from the outside. So to be within it is crazy. But I was saying to Michael Bostic, I'm like, don't ever open up your Instagram sort of like DMs from me, because I feel like I sent you one just before I moved to America, and I was like, I don't know you. I don't know, like, Dear Me, like, I haven't worked with, but I've been watching this company from the outside, and this is what I'm so excited to move to the States for, because, you know, there's companies that operate like this and sort of do the work that you guys are doing. And I think, like, when I say do the work that they're doing, it tracks back to, again, what I said about my mum, where I was like, everything I've done in media and sort of creativity was to make my mum sort of like smile. You know, Dear Media is a podcast company developed to amplify women's voices. So to be a part of something like that was crazy. So I got hired, obviously, and I've been working there for a year. And when I say like this company feels like a family to work for, like, it really does. I mean, the last couple of weeks I've been through probably some of the hardest sort of like times in my life, with losing my mother very suddenly and having to go back to Australia. And, you know, death feels like a business. But, you know, when I was saying that I have such an incredible community of people, and for the most part, they are people that I've met within podcasting and met within my full-time job at Dear Media, I truly mean that. And I feel like I've never been so supported, not just from people that I work with at Dear Media, but also too, like, talent that I work with and produce. You know, these people have become family. And I think that that is the beauty of podcasting too, because it's like, or like anything in media as well, it is so personal. So like, you can get to know people really deep, really quickly. And the people that I work with and around and for are all very caring and very honest and very intelligent people. So yeah, to be a part of that, I don't know if I'm answering this question, because I kind of got on like a massive tangent about sort of like how I ended up there. But yeah, that's sort of like how I ended up. And now I've been there for a year and things are going solid, and I couldn't be more happy. I feel like the position that I've landed myself in within podcasting, just I go to the boardroom every morning when I'm like working in office, and I pinch myself looking out at like downtown LA, being like, I'm in the Dear Media offices in Los Angeles. This is my job. This is my life. Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, so glad that things are working out. You got your dream job in a new city. That's amazing. And can you talk a little bit more? I'm curious what you're doing for them. So you're a podcast producer,
Oh yeah.
right? What
Yeah.
exactly does that entail? Like, what's a day in the life like of a podcast producer? I'm very curious.
A day in the life. Well, I do a lot of yapping. I'm Australian, so I yap a lot. And lucky for me, working in West Hollywood, there's a lot of great coffee shops. So we do a lot of coffee walks, which is nice. But the day-to-days, I mean, every day is different because of the talent that you work with and sort of like what they're bringing to the table in terms of what they want to execute. Apologies. So yeah, today was just an editing day for me. So I'm editing podcasts that are coming out tomorrow and sort of just doing a lot of emailing and back and forth and making sure ads are right and stuff like that. But then, tomorrow's a full day of recording. So I've got talent that are coming in and some talent record remotely. So they'll be in other studios which you organize, or they'll come into LA, which is always like really fun. And then, yeah, so mostly recording, editing. There's a lot of sort of like back end admin work that I think, you wouldn't necessarily expect, but I love it. I mean, it's like this weird chase of like organizing guests or helping to like book studios or find studios for talent to work out of. And one of my favorite things is working directly with talent. I have such an incredible roster of talent that I work with, and being able to sit down and help them conceptualize ideas and execute their visions with their podcasts and helping them grow and sort of like building narratives within their sort of like series of episodes and stuff like that. It's just so much fun. So every day is so different and every day is never the same. One minute you'll be working on a sports podcast and then you're working on a health podcast and then a comedy podcast. So it's like, you're always on your toes. And I think like, again, that's where sort of like I've really benefited from having such a creative circle around me, is that I'm never short of like an idea. I'm never short of like people to reach out to and be like, hey, this has come across my desk. What do you think? Because I know this is like in your area of interest. So yeah, honestly, it's so much fun. I would recommend it to anyone, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody who hears this and goes, oh, that could be the life for me. Like, always happy, because, this industry really has changed my life for the better. And I don't know if I'm answering the question of the day-to-day life, but yeah,
No,
lots of recording,
yeah.
lots of editing, even like filming, cameras, all that sort of stuff. Very creative, very fun.
Yeah, that sounds great. It seems like a perfect, amazing job. And you touched on the talent. I saw, as you saw, looking at your personal brand, your LinkedIn, things like that. I saw a lot of different examples of talent you've been working for them, such as Mood, Unhinged, a couple examples there. From working so closely with this talent and around podcasts, what strategies would you say you found most effective for growing and creating a strong, robust podcast?
For me, I would say, like, honestly, it tracks back to just like having that identity. And these people that I work with, they all know their space so well, whether it's in the comedy space or it's in the fashion space or it's in the health space. So like with the people that I work with, they're already so established. And then sort of one thing that sort of I find, you have to have in podcasting is that ability to be engaging in such an honest way, because again, the audience isn't going to sort of like listen to you if you're just bullshitting. So I would say, yeah, that sort of like knowing your identity, knowing what lane you fit in, and then sort of tailoring that as you go along to like differing trends. I mean, the industry is always changing. Listeners and how they engage with podcasts and all of that stuff is always changing. So obviously you're always looking at, engagement rates and that sort of thing. And, but I think it all comes down to just really, really, really knowing your audience, like from top to bottom, like what they love, what they hate. You've got to be there for the good. You've got to be there for the bad, and being able to really have a healthy, like, discussion with them and know the limits of like, where you can push it and where sort of like, where you need to develop and where you need work. And again, I've learned so much about audience interaction and how to build my brand from working in the space that I work at, because I work with so many people who are so great at and they're not just influencers at all, but like a part of like their role is as influencers. And then they have their businesses and they have their tours and their comedians and, you know, they have all these sort of like facets, but how they do social media and how they sort of like put their personality into it and how they make their brand work for them has taught me so much. And yeah, probably the biggest thing is just, knowing yourself and knowing like what you stand for and being able to effectively communicate that to people in a way that gives them something to walk away from and sort of like helps them feel seen from what you're doing. I think that's really important. I think that it's not like natural for people to have that many followers. I mean, you think about like, you know, where we come from in terms of like, before we were in these four walls, I mean, people weren't meant to live in houses. We just lived in the bloody savannah, you know, and it would be a little bit weird if you had like 11,000 people sitting around a campfire all to talk to you. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not natural. So I think that, you know, figuring out how to like use it for good is important. And that's why these people are so successful. I mean, it's so weird to say, and this isn't like shitting on anybody, but when you walk into a room with, and I'm going to use like, I don't think they'd mind me using them as an example. And I've got plenty of examples, but there's a podcast that I work with called Transform, and it's Sammy Clark and Sammy Spalter. And let me tell you right now, when you look at their social media and sort of like what they do with their wellness platform, they've got a brand called Form, and they do so much good in the health and wellness space. When I first met these girls, I had never felt so loved and seen, and I'd met them like first up. And I think like with a lot of these, like I think that when you sort of see like influencers or you see people that are sort of like out there with their brand, it's easy to think that it is just a job for them. But when you work closely with people like this, that I do, like you quickly realize that this is who they are and this is why they are so successful, because they're just so naturally them. Like when I talk to my talent, such as Sammy Clark or Sammy Spalter, they look you in the eye when they talk to you and they make you feel seen, and they'll reach out their hands and, you know, they will express their gratitude for you. And it just makes you feel so warm and so loved and so like a part of something. And it's like so intentional in a way that is so natural to them. Like it is absolutely who they are to their core. And then you look at their brands and why they're so successful. And I honestly would credit that as the biggest aspect. Obviously, they've got massive business brains and they're so intelligent, like they're some of the most intelligent women I've ever met. But to their core, that is who they are as people. Like, and that resonates with their audiences. So, you know, the audience wants to listen, the audience wants to follow, you know what I mean? Because they get something from it. They feel good from it. And it's like, if that is who you are as a person and you know yourself, that sort of like is the key to success in my eyes. And
I guess
obviously you have to do all the other stuff. You know, you've got to look at how business works and make the moves and whatever. But, you know, I think being true to yourself and being like sort of like a person that wants to do well in this world for everybody else as well resonates.
I guess like you're saying, it all comes back to authenticity. Like you're saying with these people, you know, they're very authentic people and you can tell just by meeting them, which is why you see so much success. And would you say on the flip side, you see common mistakes that new podcasters make in the space?
I mean, I think probably one of the biggest mistakes that I would see is just lack of confidence, one, and lack of preparedness. I mean, and lack of preparedness. A lot of people don't understand that like having a podcast, and you would know from like sort of like organizing this, it is a business. It is like a grind. You can't sort of do this. And this is something that people used to say to me in radio all the time. They'd say, I could be on the radio. I could do what you do. And I think people don't sort of give, and this is, again, tracking back to what we were saying before, where people sort of like want you to work for free in the creative industries and stuff like that. People don't give creative industries, when they're not within the creative industries, the credit that they deserve. Like, this is a big job to work in, say, radio or podcasting or photography and stuff like that. And a lot of the time you're chasing the work for yourself. You know, there's a lot at stake, especially if you have like family, kids, house, all that sort of stuff. Like, you're hustling for your money, you know, your sort of like profile and who you are as a person and the work that you do, the quality of work that you do speaks for itself, but with an industry that is like, you know, up and down and sort of like where the economy's at, and with COVID and stuff like that, media industries went through it. So like, you've got to be good at what you do, but you have to be so prepared, because I think a lot of people underestimate just how much work it is, and the consistency that you need and the grit that you have to be able to like push out a podcast, whether you're doing it weekly. People do it daily, which is like wild. A weekly podcast on a regular cadence is a lot of work. There's a lot of emails. There's a lot of preparation. If you're doing ad sales and stuff like that, there's huge teams that work on these podcasts. So like, credit to you if you're just like working on it by yourself and getting this thing off the ground, because it is a big job. So I think that's where people go wrong. They sort of underestimate just how much work you have to do to be able to get something off the ground. And honestly, like, I think, you know, people underestimate as well the work that it takes to convert an audience to the podcast space. You know, I might have 10,000, 11,000 followers on Instagram, but they're not going to all come over and listen to my podcast just because I start one. You know what I mean? You have to build up trust, and you have to build up, it's like sometimes starting again, I guess, in a new medium. I mean, not everyone's going to click and not everyone's going to come listen. You have to be able to build that up, and it takes a lot. And I think especially if you're used to having sort of like 500 comments on your Instagram posts and stuff like that, if you start out a podcast and you think it's going to be super successful from day one, and I'm not saying that it can't be, absolutely, but like, everything takes time to grow. I think it can be really disheartening to see that slow burn, but honestly, it is so worth it. The communities that I see people build through the podcast space is incredible. But yeah, just never underestimate how much work or time it is going to take to build that. And also too, like, one mistake that I see people make is giving up. You know, you might have a podcast that you do every day or once a week for 3 years, and you have 20 loyal listeners, right? And then you do one episode where you make a TikTok clip that completely changes your life, gets 5 million views, 5 million shares, and then all of a sudden you've got 20,000 people weekly listening to your podcast. You know what I mean? You just got to keep at it. And I think, yeah, there's probably, did I list 3? 2. Underestimating how much it takes to grow a podcast, underestimating how much it takes to grow a podcast, underestimating the work you have to do to execute a podcast, especially on a regular cadence, and then not believing in yourself and giving up, because, you know, any day could change your life. And then also, so I think about this, you're changing 20, even if it is just 20 people's lives that listen to you regularly, you're changing their life as well. So if it's not sort of like detrimental to your health or your well-being and like you making a buck, like, don't give up. Why? Just do things that you enjoy. Also too, I find, like, it's funny me saying this, we're talking about influencing and being on Instagram and stuff like that, but if I didn't have a following or I didn't work in like podcasting at the sort of like arena, in the arena that I do, I'd still be posting. I'd still be on community radio, you know what I mean? Because it's not about how many people like comment or listen to me specifically. It's about what it gives me personally, and sort of like what creativity does for me. I mean, the amount of photography I do, or like I'll sit here and just record things, or like record an episode of something, and no one ever hears it, no one ever sees it, but like what it does for me. So like, you know, I guess the best thing for me is that my hobby and the things that light me up really just happen to become my career.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing advice.
I feel like every answer that I give you is just this rambling tangent of me being like, oh, wait, did I answer the question? So I do apologize, but yeah.
No need to apologize. You're talking a lot, but it's good and it's all great content. So, no need to apologize at all. And you touched on the growth aspect. That's something I'm curious about. I feel like a lot of people that start podcasts or start Instagram, obviously it can be tough. They're not seeing the results. They want to give up. What would you say to people that aren't really seeing those results and are trying to figure out different ways that they can grow and find an audience? Because it seems like a lot of people that you're working with at Dear Media already have audiences, right? What would you say to someone that might be a professional in a certain niche? They have knowledge, whether that be on Instagram or podcast, and they want to grow, but they just don't really know where to start.
I think using your network, I'm a broken record, but like use your network, get your friends on your podcast, create, like we have so many great outlets to be able to spread a message or spread a word. So like film your podcast, put them on Reels, put them on TikTok, like put in the effort to be able to make those sort of like clippable, shareable moments to grow. I think that's so important. And that is seriously how some podcasts go from 10 listeners to 10,000 overnight, because someone finds them on TikTok or Instagram. Lean into your network, believe in yourself and create a great sort of like one sheet profile for yourself that you can pitch yourself out to people. You might sit there and you might be like, okay, I have 20 listeners. So like, who's going to want to talk to me? It'll take you like maximum 2 hours to just like go out there and be really intentional and say, okay, I see Jackson on LinkedIn. He works at a podcasting company. I've got a great story to tell. I've got a great message. Hey, like I might have even self-published a book. I only have 10 listeners, but here's my story. Here's my pitch. You can create a pitch that you can sort of blanket out and like tailor to everyone. It's very quick, very easy, and send it out. And you never know what bite you're going to get back. Because when I'm sort of like looking at shows that I produce and pitches that come through my email, and then this was the same case in radio, and this is the same case in podcasting, yes, like it's always great to have a big following. But if you have like an incredible story that's been untapped that comes across my desk and it catches my eye, if I can't put you on one of my podcasts, I know plenty of people in radio that are looking for local segments or whatever that I can be like, hey, you need to talk to this guy or girl because look at this story. It's fascinating. I'm not, and this is the radio brain in me as well. I think like maybe in podcasting, people might think about it differently. I don't think so. Of course, you have the shows that will only approach guests that are like famous or big, but your pitch is everything. Like your elevator pitch is everything. Get into those rooms that you want to sort of like be in. Pay to go to networking events or, go press the flesh and just really solidify your elevator pitch. Like have it down to like 30 seconds. Because who knows? You might be in an elevator and this, like you might say, no, it's not going to happen. The people that I've ran into in the strangest places here, like you might end up in an elevator with Kris Jenner or Khloe Kardashian. In LA, it's not that crazy, right? And if I was trying to start a podcast to get some momentum, I'd book a flight to LA and I'd go and hang out in like a celebrity hotspot for a night and just like press the flesh. Because you know what, if you have your elevator pitch, if you are engaging, like, and you can offer value, people will say yes, and you'll be surprised at like the magnitude of people that will go, yeah, come on my show because that is an amazing story. And you might go, well, I have 200 followers. It doesn't matter. You've got an incredible message, an incredible story, and you're providing value. So I think never undersell yourself. What I said before, feel free to be delusional. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen if you're like completely delusional and you're like, this matters? You're just not going to get a response if someone's going to say no. And then when someone says no, you go, okay, thank you so much. It would be so helpful if you told me why, like what is stopping you? And you can be super polite about that. And that is how you sort of like grow and you learn how to pivot. I think that's one thing in the industry that you've really got to know how to do so well is be able to pivot because things are changing so quickly. And when I say pivot, you don't have to go, okay, I'm going to do something that's not who I am. That's not at all. But you've got to look at trends. You've got to look at who's engaging and why they're engaging and where they're engaging and when they're engaging. And if you're not prepared to pivot, and if you're not prepared to grow and you're not prepared to change within the ideas that you have, then you are already putting a box around yourself, if that sort of makes sense. I always say all the time, I'm very set in my ways and I'm very like, opinionated and I have strong opinions, but I will never place myself in a room and I will never place myself in an arena where I'm not willing to hear someone else out. And if I don't understand or agree, I can go, oh, well, I respect that you have that thought. That's not mine. And I don't have to fight with them. And I'm always willing to have my mind changed as well. Like, I'm not the guy that's like, you can't change my mind, you never will. You know what I mean? I'm often happy to be like, I was wrong about that. I was a bit of a dick about that. And now I'm not like that, you know, and that is personal growth. But yeah, I think just don't box yourself in. Don't undersell yourself and be delusional in a sense that's not offensive. Like, you don't have to be a delusional prick, but you can be like delusional in a way that's like endearing and could get you somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
I'm
love
like
that.
an optimist. I'm like a huge optimist. I mean, I could sit here and be like, spend money on advertising and this and that and whatever. And like, of course, there are things you've got to do. And like, I would say invest in like, if you're not good at audio editing or video editing and stuff like that, like invest in that. Or if you don't have the money to invest, reach out to people who are building a portfolio, reach out to universities, education, all that sort of stuff. Because this is the thing, like you might not have money to spend on advertising or like video or like editing, but there are people out there who might need to build up their portfolio that are willing to like meet you in the middle or do like, or work with you. Like you can sort of like springboard off of each other to help each other. Do you know what I mean? I think that that is the beauty of this community. But yeah, not boxing yourself in and not sort of like writing yourself off.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's amazing advice. Well, I got one last question for you. So you're talking about moving from Australia to LA, content creation, photography, working for your dream job and podcasting, and building up your personal brand. What's the one piece of advice that you wish you knew when you started this whole journey? And for people that want to kind of have that creative journey, follow their dreams, do something kind of in this creative sphere, what would you say to them?
I don't know if it's like unconventional advice, but it's not that serious. And I say that in a sense of like somebody who, if I had my way with my sort of like, and again, I feel like I'm a very stable, level-headed guy, but the creative industries especially are stressful. Like you're like when you're in like a lot of these industries like radio or TV or like not so much photography or whatever, but even photography, I mean, there's a lot on the line and it can cause a lot of pressure to be photographing someone's event that's only going to happen once, or like a wedding. They're never going to get that first kiss again. And if you miss it, you're going to feel like a dick,
true.
right?
Yeah.
I really am someone that will go home and have a beer in the shower and just think, I don't like to swear on this podcast, just leave it out. Just be like, fuck, like, why did I do that? Like, my biggest thing is like overthinking. And I wish someone said to me, it's really not until I got into podcasting that people said like, hey, it's not that serious. So like, have your moment. And when I say it's not that serious, everything's serious. Like, it's your job, it's your income. And like, obviously people are paying for services and there's like whatever on the line. So if you make a mistake, make the mistake, learn from it, and move on. You don't have to like dwell on it. There's going to be a million no's. Like, just believe in yourself, keep pushing on. If I just dipped out the first time that I got a no, or the first time I got criticism, or the first time that I was working in an arena where people were like, how are you here? Because you're not that good. If I just had someone telling me at the beginning it's not that serious, I would have lost a lot less hair. I grew it all back, thank God. Because I'm in an environment and a headspace now that I'm like not stressed about things and I can like actively manage expectations. And I think like when you are somebody who works in creative industries, I feel like we do, a lot of us, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I think a lot of us have an unhealthy emotional attachment to our work because it is so personal. Like when you're doing a podcast or you're putting out photography, it is so much more personal than, you know, just writing a spreadsheet for numbers or whatever, because numbers are numbers. They're always going to be like the same. Like, and again, not saying that an accountant's not doing an important job. They're absolutely doing an important job. But I think when you're doing like a creative job that you're putting your heart and soul and like everything that makes you like the fabric of who you are, you're putting into it. When someone goes, oh, that's a bit shit, you go, oh, like I personally am emotionally attached to it. So I'm like, okay, is that a reflection on me? And it took a long time for me to be like, not a reflection on me. Not everyone's going to resonate with what you do. And it's really just not that serious. No one's going to die if you make an editing mistake in a podcast. Best not to, because that's professionalism. People make mistakes. And one fortunate thing that I always take away from this, and, you know, some people that I work with now who I really respect and value have said to me, best thing about podcasting is we don't have our hands in anyone's like frontal lobe. We're not poking around in someone's brain. Like, we're not saving lives in the sense of if we make a mistake, that's cutting someone's life short. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A mistake's a mistake, grow, learn. It's just not that serious. You know? And in the creative industries, when you take it like it's not that serious, like I honestly feel like I've done my best work because I'm not fearful to jump in and be like, I'm going to try something new. Because I'm like, if it fails, it's not that serious. But before, I put myself in that box, which I was saying before, don't put yourself in the box, because I was like, I didn't want to try things that were new. I wanted to stick to things that were tried and tested and true, because I was like, if I fail, that makes me look dumb. But like, honestly, yeah, not that serious. And most things you can recover from.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. I love the advice of not taking things too serious, especially because yesterday I actually finished reading, if you're familiar with the book, The Unsubtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by, I think his name's Mark Manson. And a lot of what he's saying is kind of what you're preaching there. So I could definitely relate to that. I think it's absolutely great advice.
It's honestly, I read that book just before I moved to America. So yeah, I can stand on that it's helped me a lot, you know. And on that point, like just reading that sort of stuff, and I think like reading books like that and reading books of like people who are in your industry and seeing their journey, and again, back to community. When you like dive into your community and you surround yourself with successful people and you go, okay, these people are where I want to be at, right? They always say, if you want to be a millionaire, go sit in rooms with millionaires and they'll teach you their way. Sure. When you hear about the mistakes that other people make that they think are big deals, in your head, you're like, not that bad, you know? It really levels you out. It gives you a better perspective. And this is one of the reasons why I was saying before, super emotional as a person. Like, I'll wear my emotions on my sleeve and I feel things real hard and I dive into feelings really hard. And I'll never shy away from it, because it's like everyone has a universal experience, I think, with like how they feel about stuff. And the less we like fake it, the more comfortable and confident people around you become to be able to like dive into their emotions and not cry in the shower about their bloody mistakes. You know what I mean?
That's great. Well, Jackson, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. I feel like I definitely learned a lot. Hopefully, whoever's listening, whether your goal is podcast or growing on social media or whatever it is, you can really take away a lot here. So before we wrap up, Jackson, what are your socials for those people that are hopefully listening to check you out?
Honestly, I only do Instagram because I'm very intimidated by TikTok. I feel like my nieces and nephews would rip me to shreds if I tried to make a creative TikTok. But that is Jackson on Instagram. And then I have sort of like all my emails and stuff like that on there. So if anyone is listening to this, obviously Ezra is your man to reach out to for anything podcast related. But if you do like want to jump into my inbox, feel free. I always reply. I'm always here to give advice or help or listen or whatever. So yeah, that is Jackson on Instagram. Hit me up.
Great. Well, guys, you heard him. Check out his Instagram. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, go check out Jackson's page, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode, staying around to the end. I really hope that you got a lot from it. And if you enjoyed, don't forget to share with all your friends that you think can get value from this. And if you haven't already done so, leave a review. That really does help. And I'm excited to see you guys in the next episode.